When police reached the end of Stonepath Road, they expected a hit and run. Instead, they found a body with no injuries, no footprints, and no explanation for how it got there. The story closes reflectively, questioning whether some places remember violence long after people forget, followed by a soft invitation to viewers to share their thoughts, their theories, and to follow this channel for more cases that refuse to stay buried. When deputies forced open the rusted chain gate at the end of Stonepath Road, the first thing noted in the police log wasn't the body, but the silence, a detail that stood out enough for one officer to underline it twice in pen, because silence like that doesn't belong to a place where a man is supposed to have just died. The call came in at 3:42 a.m. on November 11, 2009, from a long-haul truck driver cutting through rural Indiana who reported something lying in the road that didn't move. And by the time the first cruiser arrived outside the unincorporated town of Briar Hollow, headlights washed over the pale outline of a barefoot man positioned unnaturally flat against the cold asphalt, arms at his sides, eyes open, as if placed there rather than struck. The victim was later identified as Daniel Mercer, age 34, born and raised in Briar Hollow, a quiet mill-adjacent town where everyone knew each other's routines, and where nothing ever happened without becoming shared knowledge by morning. Yet no one reported hearing a crash, a scream, or even a car that night. Initial assumptions leaned toward a hit and run, but within minutes that theory began to fray, because there were no skid marks, no broken glass, no blood spatter, and no trauma consistent with impact, something even the rookie on scene reportedly noticed before the coroner arrived. Mercer's clothes were intact but damp with morning dew, his shoes missing entirely, and his cell phone was found nearly 30 yards away near mile marker 7, cracked beyond use, as though thrown with force rather than dropped, and already the responding officers began asking a question that wouldn't make it into the official narrative. Why would a man remove his shoes on a pitch-black rural road in 40-degree weather, and why here? According to statements collected later that day, Mercer had left his sister's house at 10:15 p.m., joking about the long drive and promising to text when he got home, and multiple witnesses confirmed he was sober, relaxed, and showed no signs of distress. Yet his car was never found, no abandoned vehicle turned up in surrounding counties, and no financial or personal history suggested he planned to disappear. When the coroner conducted the preliminary examination on site, another inconsistency emerged quietly, noted only in the margins of the report. Mercer's body temperature suggested he had died far later than the estimated window based on when he vanished, as if the night itself had stretched or folded in a way that didn't match the clock. And while this discrepancy was eventually attributed to environmental factors, one deputy later admitted off record that the math never quite worked. As dawn approached, officers expanded the perimeter, sweeping the tree line that bordered the road, a dense wall of oak and limestone outcroppings that locals referred to simply as the Quarry Woods, remnants of an abandoned stone operation from the 1930s, long since reclaimed by moss and rumor. And during that search, radio logs captured several moments of unexplained static and dropped transmissions, something technicians would later blame on terrain. Though those same radios functioned perfectly elsewhere. By mid-morning, the scene was cleared, the body removed, and Stonepath Road reopened. But something lingered in the tone of the reports, a subtle shift from certainty to discomfort, as if everyone involved sensed that what lay in the road was only the final frame of a much longer, unseen sequence. The official cause of death would eventually be listed as undetermined, a rare designation that satisfied paperwork but satisfied no one else, especially Daniel Mercer's family, who struggled to understand how a man could vanish from a familiar drive and reappear hours later in a place locals avoided after dark, barefoot, uninjured, and alone. And as news of the incident spread through Briar Hollow, whispered details began circulating alongside the facts, older stories about Stonepath Road. About lights moving between the trees, about sounds echoing up from the quarry long after it was sealed, stories the police dismissed as folklore, but which, for some reason, seemed to align too closely with where Daniel Mercer was found. And the unanswered question that settled over the town that morning was not how he died, but where he had been before anyone found him. Where he had been before anyone found him became the question detectives avoided asking out loud, because answering it meant stepping beyond timelines and into the kind of uncertainty that doesn't fit neatly inside a case file. Yet the deeper they dug into Daniel Mercer's final hours, the harder it became to ignore the gaps. Investigators retraced his intended route home, a 15-minute drive he had taken hundreds of times, passing through a stretch of road that narrowed as it approached Stonepath, where pavement thinned and tree cover thickened enough to swallow headlights. And while traffic cameras covered the main highway exit, none captured Mercer's vehicle after 10:31 p.m., leaving a dead zone of nearly 5 miles where nothing official could account for his movements. Officers initially assumed his car might have veered into a ditch or been stripped for parts, but exhaustive searches turned up nothing. No tire tracks leading off-road, no oil stains, no reports of a suspicious vehicle abandoned nearby. And when aerial surveys were conducted weeks later, even heat signatures revealed only empty woods and the long, shadowed cut of the old quarry pit. Police interviews with neighbors along Stonepath produced statements that were consistent in tone, but not in detail. People describing an unease that night, a feeling that something was wrong without being able to say why. And several residents independently mentioned hearing what they thought was someone walking along the road after midnight, slow footsteps that stopped whenever porch lights flicked on. Something that never escalated into a call because, as one resident put it, Stonepath makes noise at night. And you learn to live with it. That phrase caught the attention of detectives, prompting a closer look at the road's past, and county archives revealed that Stonepath had been the site of multiple unexplained incidents over the decades, including 2 deaths officially ruled as exposure despite mild weather, and 1 missing persons case from 1987 that quietly went cold after search teams reported disorientation and equipment malfunctions in the quarry woods. As these details surfaced, Daniel Mercer's phone records added another layer of discomfort, showing 3 outgoing calls placed between 11:48 p.m. and 12:03 a.m., all of them incomplete, all of them cutting off after less than 10 seconds, as if the signal dropped or the caller changed his mind mid-breath, and none of the intended recipients recalled receiving even a missed call notification. Forensic analysis of the phone revealed pressure fractures inconsistent with a simple fall, suggesting it had been crushed or thrown against a hard surface. Yet there was no corresponding damage to Mercer's hands, no cuts or abrasions that would explain how it happened. A particularly troubling detail emerged when detectives reviewed the audio logs from dispatch that night, discovering a brief, unmarked transmission at 12:17 a.m., picked up faintly on an open channel, containing what sounded like heavy breathing and a single word that couldn't be clearly identified. A clip that was later attributed to radio interference and quietly removed from the official evidence list. Within the department, opinions began to diverge, some officers pushing to classify the case as an unfortunate anomaly, others privately admitting the scene didn't behave the way death scenes usually do, especially when one veteran deputy noted that animals avoided the body entirely. No scavenging marks present even after hours in the open, something he claimed he'd never seen before. Meanwhile, Daniel Mercer's sister continued pressing for answers, filing formal requests that exposed inconsistencies in officer arrival times and a 40-minute window where no unit could clearly account for its location. A gap explained away as clerical error, but never fully reconciled. As winter settled over Briar Hollow, the quarry woods grew quiet again, but locals began reporting flickering lights near mile marker 7, pale glows that moved just below the tree line and vanished when approached. Reports logged but never investigated after patrols found nothing out of place. And as these stories circulated, the Mercer case stopped feeling like an isolated tragedy and started to resemble something the town had seen before but never fully acknowledged. By the time detectives compiled their final report, the facts remained stubbornly incomplete. A man gone without a vehicle, a body returned without injury, evidence that appeared, disappeared, and reappeared in places already cleared, and a road that seemed to absorb details rather than reveal them, leaving behind a question that no amount of paperwork could settle. If Daniel Mercer didn't die on Stonepath Road, what brought him back there hours later? And why did the place itself seem unwilling to let that answer surface? Why the place itself seemed unwilling to let that answer surface became disturbingly clear as attention shifted away from Daniel Mercer and toward Stonepath Road, because once investigators began treating the location as more than a backdrop, patterns started emerging that were impossible to unsee. County infrastructure records showed the road was built directly over the original access route to Briar Hollow Quarry in 1931, a limestone operation that shut down abruptly after a partial collapse killed 3 workers during a night shift. an incident documented in sparse language that never clarified how experienced miners failed to evacuate in time. No bodies were recovered, the pit was sealed, and within a decade the access road was paved over and renamed Stonepath, a bureaucratic decision that effectively buried the site's history beneath asphalt and silence. Older residents remembered their parents warning them not to wander near the quarry woods after sunset, not with stories of ghosts, but with a more practical fear that people who went in too deep sometimes came back disoriented, confused about how long they'd been gone or not at all. These accounts never reached official reports, but they surfaced during off-the-record interviews, the kind detectives conduct when they suspect a truth exists outside formal statements. One retired sheriff admitted that during his tenure in the late 1990s, Stonepath generated an unusual number of calls involving stalled vehicles, lost hikers, and drivers claiming their watches had stopped while passing mile marker 7, all incidents written off as coincidence but quietly nicknamed the Stonepath effect among deputies. When Daniel Mercer's timeline was re-examined in that context, his missing hours no longer looked random but consistent, almost familiar. The quarry itself, now hidden by trees and erosion, was searched again using ground-penetrating radar, revealing voids beneath the surface that didn't match existing maps, hollow pockets where stone had collapsed unevenly, creating chambers that engineers couldn't easily explain without extensive excavation that never received funding. During one survey, equipment malfunctioned repeatedly, batteries draining at abnormal rates, readings fluctuating without cause, forcing the team to abandon the effort early. And while these anomalies were later blamed on moisture and mineral interference, the technicians involved requested not to be assigned there again. Witness interviews grew stranger as well, particularly when a volunteer firefighter came forward years after the fact, stating that on the night Daniel Mercer disappeared, he had driven past Stonepath around 12:30 a.m. and seen a figure standing near the tree line, barefoot, illuminated briefly by headlights, not waving for help but facing the woods, motionless as though listening. He assumed it was a drunk or a daredevil and kept driving, only realizing later, when Mercer's photo circulated, that the face matched, a realization that left him shaken enough to file a delayed statement that was later deemed unreliable and quietly removed from the main case file. Audio evidence from nearby homes added another layer, as a resident's outdoor security camera captured faint, rhythmic sounds that night, not quite footsteps, not quite mechanical, repeating for nearly 20 minutes before stopping abruptly at 12:47 a.m., the same window during which Mercer's phone attempted its final incomplete call. Analysts couldn't definitively identify the noise, and without a clear source, it was archived and forgotten, though the homeowner claimed the recording gave her headaches when played at full volume. As these fragments accumulated, investigators faced an uncomfortable possibility that Daniel Mercer may have been alive, conscious, and somewhere near Stonepath long after he vanished from the expected route, yet unable or unwilling to leave, and that whatever held him there did not leave marks on the body or clear traces in the environment. By the time the case reached its third year with no resolution, Stonepath Road had become less a crime scene and more a boundary, a place where ordinary explanations thinned out and uncertainty took over, forcing everyone involved to confront a question that had hovered since the beginning, not just what happened to Daniel Mercer, but whether Stonepath was capable of altering the people who passed through it, and if so, how many others had stood in those woods before him, listening to something no one else could hear. How many others had stood in those woods before him, listening to something no one else could hear, became a question that refused to stay theoretical once new evidence surfaced years after the case was presumed dormant, because Stonepath did not remain quiet for long. In the spring of 2016, nearly 7 years after Daniel Mercer's death, 2 hikers ventured off a marked trail near the quarry woods and discovered a small clearing that search teams had already documented and dismissed during the original investigation. Yet lying at its center was a careful arrangement of personal items unmistakably belonging to Mercer. His wallet, a keyring engraved with his initials, and one of the missing shoes, all resting on a flat slab of limestone, as if deliberately placed rather than scattered by time or wildlife. The items showed minimal environmental damage, no gnaw marks, no rot, no soil staining consistent with long-term exposure, a finding that troubled forensic analysts who confirmed the materials should have deteriorated significantly after even one Indiana winter. When questioned, the hikers insisted the clearing had not been there during previous visits, describing the trees as having grown in a loose semicircle around the stone, creating a natural enclosure that felt, in their words, unfinished, a description that was later omitted from the official discovery report. Police reopened the case quietly, avoiding media attention, and when investigators returned to the site, they found no signs of recent human activity, no footprints, no broken branches, and no explanation for how items cleared years earlier had returned intact to a location already searched. Laboratory analysis confirmed the shoe bore Mercer's DNA and traced limestone dust consistent with the quarry pit. Yet no matching dust was found on his body at the original scene, a discrepancy that deepened the mystery rather than resolving it. Around the same time, dispatch logs revealed a pattern of late-night calls originating near Stonepath that were never formally categorized. Reports of stalled engines, sudden nausea, and a sensation of pressure in the ears that vanished once drivers exited the area. Calls often resolved before patrol units arrived, leaving behind no incident number, only a line in the log. One deputy admitted that officers avoided prolonged stops near mile marker 7 whenever possible, not out of fear, but because radios crackled unpredictably and compasses drifted just enough to make navigation feel unreliable. As word of the reopened investigation spread through Briar Hollow, more witnesses came forward, including a former county maintenance worker who recalled repairing a section of Stonepath months before Mercer's death and discovering a shallow depression beneath the asphalt that seemed to shift under weight, a hollow he described as breathing, a claim dismissed by supervisors at the time, but now revisited with uneasy interest. Medical records from the earlier Stonepath fatalities were re-examined as well, revealing similarities that had gone unnoticed. Victims found without defensive injuries, mild hypothermia inconsistent with conditions, and a shared absence of memory reported by survivors of non-fatal incidents. Drivers who wandered into the woods and later claimed they lost track of time without feeling lost. The deeper investigators went, the more Stonepath resisted clarity, producing fragments instead of conclusions, evidence that appeared without explanation, and then refused to align when examined too closely. By the end of 2016, the case stalled once more, not because leads were exhausted, but because every new detail raised questions no one could answer without stepping beyond accepted frameworks. And as files were archived again, one detective noted in a private memo that Stonepath behaved less like a location and more like a process, something that people entered and did not always exit unchanged. That memo never reached the family, never reached the public, but it captured the growing consensus among those closest to the case, that Daniel Mercer's death was not an isolated event, but part of a pattern that stretched backward through unrecorded history and forward into an uncertain future, leaving behind only the lingering, uncomfortable sense that whatever claimed him was still there, waiting, and that Stonepath Road had not finished telling its story. That Stonepath Road had not finished telling its story became evident in the years that followed, as incidents continued to accumulate quietly, never dramatic enough to attract national attention, yet too consistent to ignore among those who lived nearby. Between 2017 and 2021, county records show a spike in roadside assistance calls clustered almost entirely around the same 2-mile stretch. Vehicles stalling without mechanical cause, drivers reporting sudden disorientation, and in several cases, individuals found wandering on foot, unable to explain where their cars were or how long they had been walking. One such case involved a college student passing through Briar Hollow in October of 2018, discovered barefoot near the quarry woods just before dawn, dehydrated and confused, insisting he had only stopped his car for a minute after feeling lightheaded, though GPS data later showed his phone stationary near Stonepath for nearly 4 hours. Medical evaluations found no drugs or alcohol in his system, no head trauma, and no psychological history that could account for the episode. And while he eventually recovered, he refused to discuss what he remembered about the time he lost, requesting his name be removed from public records. Investigators comparing his case to Daniel Mercer's noted chilling parallels: the missing shoes, the distorted sense of time, the pull toward the tree line, details that echoed across files separated by decades, yet no official connection was ever drawn. Internally, some officers began treating Stonepath with a kind of procedural caution, shortening patrol durations and logging vague area checks. Rather than extended stops, an informal practice never codified but quietly understood. Meanwhile, Daniel Mercer's family continued to push for transparency, uncovering through further records requests that several pieces of evidence from the original investigation, including audio files and field notes, had been reclassified or misplaced. A bureaucratic explanation that did little to ease their suspicion that the full story was being diluted over time. In 2020, an independent journalist reviewing cold cases stumbled across the Mercer file and requested access, only to be met with resistance and redacted documents, prompting speculation that the case raised concerns beyond liability or public image. Locals, however, didn't need confirmation, as stories circulated of headlights catching movement just beyond the road, of people feeling watched when stopping near mile marker 7, and of a low, rhythmic sound emerging from the woods on still nights, described variously as wind, machinery, or something breathing beneath the ground. A geological survey conducted for unrelated land development added another unsettling note, identifying subsurface instability consistent with large voids beneath the quarry woods, spaces that did not correspond to known mining activity and appeared to shift subtly over time, an observation filed as low risk but never fully explained. As these findings piled up without resolution, Stonepath Road began to feel less like a place defined by tragedy and more like a boundary between what could be measured and what could only be experienced, a stretch of land where normal rules seemed slightly misaligned. For those who had stood on that asphalt at night, listening to the woods press in from both sides, the sense lingered that Daniel Mercer hadn't simply died there, but had encountered something that removed him from the ordinary flow of time and returned him only when whatever held him no longer needed him. And as new drivers continued to pass through Briar Hollow, unaware of the road's history, the question remained unspoken but persistent, whether Stonepath was still taking people in small, almost imperceptible ways, and if so, how many stories like Daniel Mercer's existed only in fragments, waiting for someone to notice the pattern before it repeated itself again. Whether Stonepath was still taking people in small, almost imperceptible ways is a question that lingers unanswered, because despite increased awareness and quiet caution among locals, the road remains open, unmarked, and officially ordinary, its danger existing only in memory, paperwork, and the uneasy instincts of those who know its history. In the years since the last documented incident, patrol logs show fewer calls, not because the experiences stopped, but because drivers learned not to report what they couldn't explain, choosing instead to leave the area as quickly as possible and convince themselves it was fatigue, stress, or imagination. Daniel Mercer's case remains listed as unsolved, his name filed under an administrative category that implies closure without delivering it, and his family continues to visit the site where he was found, standing at the edge of the asphalt and staring into the woods that refuse to give anything back. Former investigators have since admitted, unofficially and often reluctantly, that Stonepath challenged their understanding of cause and effect. That evidence behaved strangely there, timelines bent, and conclusions dissolved the closer they looked. Even now, maintenance crews report equipment failures near mile marker 7, surveyors note slight discrepancies in distance measurements, and hikers describe a sensation of pressure that lifts the moment they step away from the quarry woods, details too subtle to alarm authorities, but too consistent to dismiss entirely. Stonepath does not announce itself as dangerous. It does not warn or threaten. It simply waits, absorbing footsteps, headlights, and moments of inattention, leaving behind gaps that families and case files struggle to fill. Daniel Mercer's story endures not because it proves something supernatural, but because it exposes how fragile certainty becomes when the environment itself refuses to behave, when a place quietly disrupts the systems meant to understand it. And as long as Stonepath Road exists as just another line on a map, driven every night by people who don't know its past, the possibility remains that someone else will feel that pull toward the trees, lose track of time, and return changed or not at all. If you were driving alone through Briar Hollow and your engine stalled near that stretch of road, would you stay inside your car and wait for help, or would you step out and listen to what the woods might be asking of you? And if stories like this matter to you, stories that sit uncomfortably between crime and the unexplained, consider subscribing to this Chanel Asterisk, Because some places don't need legends to be dangerous, they only need to be forgotten.